My face looks really shiny. It's the Eucerin I just got from my dermatologist. Today's video, I wanted to talk about Time Shelter, which has been nominated for the International Booker shortlist. It was one of the few from the long list that interested me, and the only one from the long list that made it to the shortlist that interested me. So yeah, I mean, power to the people who can do the whole list and do reviews. You're amazing. I'm not that person. I'm very glad you're that person. I applaud. But yes, the book that I have read thus far is Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov, a Bulgarian author. And this video is not going to be spoil free. It's not going to be even really a review. It's mostly going to be my thoughts on the book. So if you've already read the book and you kind of, maybe you're interested in hearing someone's thoughts about it, or if you don't care about spoilers, which is like, I'm in that camp, or whatever, you know, you just stumbled across it, wanted to watch, this video is more for you. But if you don't want spoilers, don't continue. It's not gonna be that spoilery, but still, don't continue. So Time Shelter is the kind of basic premise is a man, Gostin, opens this place which on different levels is different decades, and it is for people who have, you know, Alzheimer's or any kind of degenerative memory condition to come and live in a place that is more comfortable for them. So yeah, it has like a 60s floor, 70s floor, etc. And our main character, who I believe is like a Gospodinov insert, like I think the name is the same, he basically, as someone with like a journalistic background, researches these eras and finds stuff to put in so that like won't be anachronisms and stuff like that. It's, I think, conceptually quite interesting, though from other stuff I've seen, maybe not exactly like that particular element of the book. It's not exactly like the most original, like it's kind of been done before. But what's really fascinating is the author then expands this and takes it into like time shelter cities and countries, and it becomes this big wave of, you know, voting on which, you know, decade, which year you want to be in for different countries in Europe. Now, my thoughts on this book are kind of really outside of the element of like exactly what's going on.
Okay, so because that means literally nothing, when I say my thoughts are not about what is going on, I mean to say that I'm not going to be focusing exactly on the plot per se. This is mostly going to just be my generalized opinions and thoughts generated from reading the book.
The way I see the book is, it's this commentary on appealing to the past and the consequences of appealing to it. In the beginning, we see some of these older folks who do have, you know, Alzheimer's or have lost their memory in some way or another. And to me, this was a very emotional part of the book, and I found it genuinely difficult to get through because of seeing memory from these people's perspective. Not only do we see it from like the consequence of age, but we also see it from how bad the past could be. I mean, we see one person who, his thing is that like John Lennon has died, but he's a really big Beatles fan. And even though he doesn't exactly remember that John Lennon has died, he has a feeling of that. And to me, I kind of see that as being like, even if we were to be able to get some of the things from our past, like we know their expiration date, we know that they're gone, like even the stuff we care about, we know it's not here anymore. We also see a man who was kind of followed by a secret police, and we see that he's lost his memory, but the state is able to maintain it in this way through this other guy. I mean, he might not be like officially sanctioned anymore, but his memory is kept in someone else's head. We see the effects of the state watching him, what that did to his life, and we can make conclusions about the world that he lived in, you know, and what would that have been like to be in a country with such a surveillance state. And then, of course, we have this older woman who, when she remembers the past, she remembers war and violence. And that particular part where it's sort of this like individual, but in this external way, like the individuals that you communicate with. We see that experience then juxtaposed with when our narrator goes back to Bulgaria, where he's from, and these people clamor to attend these events, and we see kind of revivals of like socialism and all of like that, you know, movement, like the social movement of socialism, right? And then we also see like these, you know, like historical events that were important in Bulgaria's past. And to me, there was something kind of interesting about this, and I sort of, when I was reading it, it kind of read to me like when you see these people who really romanticize, like, I don't know, the Soviet Union, there's some element of this where it's, you know, people who were around there, but they're really remembering their life, right? Like, there's a joke of like, oh, like I wish I could go back to the 70s. Like, why do you like the 70s? It's like, I don't know, I was young and I was active and my penis worked. Like, they're not romanticizing, you know, that time exactly. They're romanticizing their youth. There's also an element of people who actually are falling for like the myth making and mythologizing. I think about all these people who like didn't exist in the Soviet Union, like tankies or whatever, and they're like really obsessed with it, and it's like and I like how Gospodinov even like plays on that with his comment about like feminine hygiene products. It's very funny and astute, right? Like, it's so easy to care about that stuff when you don't have to live in the reality of what that looked like on the ground. The other side of this, right, is a like more, in my opinion, like nationalistic move, and you know, that definitely has consequences, especially when, you know, nationalistic identity is often tied with like ethnicity and with like extreme right-wing movements. And I think we do see like a lot of movement towards this like socialism v fascism happening, and it does feel distinctly reminiscent of the past. And we see the xenophobia, because if you're trying to rebuild a past, you know, X country, you know, where do people who have immigrated to your country exist? Where are, you know, where are Caribbean people in the UK of the past? Where do they exist? What places are they allowed to occupy? If you want to think about it in that way, which I think in any conversation about the past, you need to think about like the people who are presently there, especially in the way it's like proposed in this book. When he's in Bulgaria, one thing we learn is that a lot of these like movements, like the socialist movement and like the recreation of the historical thing, like those were also orchestrated. There was some element of like behind the scenes work. There are people who were profiting off of and orchestrating and working towards getting these events off the ground. And to me, there's something about that is like very true. Like, whenever someone is making the past to be this beautiful thing and very aspirational, you kind of have to question why. Like, why are they trying to get you to buy into that? And here we see that there is sort of these grand schemes, and even if people themselves are also like falling back into that, and they're also wanting the past, like in the book specifically, like people are dressing like the past and etc., etc. If people are doing that, and then you also have these companies who are profiting off of that, are like finding a way to make money there's like this really twisted dynamic of like encouraging something because it makes you money. And I think about that kind of now sort of pulling back into looking at this from the modern perspective. Like, it's hard to sell someone the future because it's unsure and it's unknown, but it's really easy to sell the past. It's also really easy to sell the past when you specifically erase or forget about parts of it. And I don't know, especially in the US too, when you see all these movements to like control what kids learn in school. Like, if you want to talk about the early 1940s in the US, and you talk about it from the perspective of like women were able to go into the like, you know, the workforce, and they were doing all this stuff, and there was like economic boom, and you leave out the part about the World War going on, like you can paint and adjust how history is taught. But then you want to talk about World War II, and you want to talk about what America did in that time, you know, you can make it look really nice. Like, we came in and we saved Europe. I feel like that's a lot of how that story is told if you don't bring up Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Also, if you don't bring up that like the US had immigration policies that like limited the amount of Jewish people that could come into this country, like you start to think about the Holocaust very differently when you remember that there were like, you know, Jewish people who tried to come into the US like on that one ship, and the US turned them away, and most of those people ended up dying like in labor camps. Like that is a very different context of history. And if someone can paint and control the way that you learn history, if someone is able to erase those jagged edges, and they can sell you on this dream of a like happy, chipper, go lucky time when women were able to go into the workforce and do all of this stuff, if they can only prepackage that part to you, like that is so dangerous. You know, like I in the US remember when Obergefell v. Hodges was passed. Like now I'm an adult, right? And like I could not imagine a world in which gay people were not allowed to marry in the US. Like that is wild to me that is something I remember. And there are people who are actively trying to take that away, and they're doing that by appealing to the past. And that's really scary. And like the only reason you appeal to the past, in my opinion, is because you don't believe in a future. Like why not move forward? Why not build a world that is better and more inclusive and solves the problems? Like how much are you trying to remove people's like ability to do anything if all you want to do is take them back? So yeah, very clearly I had a lot of thoughts about this book. And the book ends with our main character. There's the whole thing about like him and Agustin maybe being the same person. In my opinion, it's kind of like a Jason Bourne or something, where it's like there's the cosmic role of Ghosteen and someone must always fill it. But that's neither here nor there. The thing that really stood out to me is while our main character, he is losing his memory. And the last thing that he kind of experiences in the book, right, is his mother, like something happening with him when he was a child and his mother. And then also we are seeing, because of these acting, this like historic reenactments, we are seeing that Europe, they have gone, like they're serious. People are seriously reenacting these things. Like they seriously reenact the assassination of Franz Ferdinand by Principe. And then they seriously start to go to war. And the events, we can tell like they're to play forward. And go, at this time, our narrator is a child. And when you're a child, the world might be scary, but you are safe from the responsibility of dealing with it. You are able to ignore everything because you have no autonomy, no ability to make decisions for yourself. And that is what happens when you appeal to these things. You are wiped clean of responsibility because it happened and you're a child and you can't do anything. You have, you know, that safety of like being, you know, under the care of your mother is also a situation in which you are incapable of doing anything. So, I don't know. I think that the book, especially, like there's so much of it that's like very, I think, Eastern European and will be relatable to people who have that background. I think it was like a very interesting read, and it makes me think a lot. Like, is it like necessarily the most amazing book I've ever read? No. But it definitely, as you can see, I had a lot of thoughts about it. And I certainly don't want to say that this is like in any way like what the author was intending. I think this is just my little rabbit brain running around in my head. But let me know if any of these ideas kind of appealed to you, any takeaways you had from this book. Yeah, clearly it had an impact on me. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next one.